The Motorola Razr is among one of the most iconic and popular devices in the entire history of smartphones. At first glance, the Razr appears to be a pretty basic device, but its premium materials, compactness, and unbelievably thin design sold 130 million units for Motorola, making it the best-selling flip phone and one of the best-selling smartphones of all time. The phone was everywhere, from popular television shows and big movies to fashion icons and even celebrities. I mean, how often is it that famous people with loads of money come out and flex their flip phones? Alas, my loyal subscribers, times were much different then. Motorola was seen as the quote unquote cool brand. They were basically the Apple of 2004. They had set a trend that many other big companies like Samsung themselves were following. They were drawing in millions of buyers from what was a rather basic and simple, yet unbelievably successful device. But fame and stardom doesn't usually last forever. Apple introduced their globally famous iPhone in 2007, just under 2 years after the Razr was officially released. The iPhone had significant improvements over the Razr, its most notable being its multi-touch capacitive touchscreen, which, as we all probably guessed, is much easier and way better to use compared to traditional flip phones. As touchscreens were taking over, flip phones were being phased out and forgotten. This sudden change to the smartphone industry led Motorola to discontinue selling the Razr in 2008, just a year after the iPhone was released, and hop on the bandwagon to making touchscreen smartphones. Well, after 12 years of being 6 foot under, the Moto Razr is back from the dead. But there's a catch. It's a foldable smartphone that costs $1,500. Oh yeah, and it completely sucks. It's gonna be a long video. You're watching The Gizmo Show, and without further ado, this video starts now. Now, the Moto Razr is by no means the worst smartphone out there you could buy. I mean, we've definitely seen much worse. But for a G and a half, this is the absolute worst way to waste your money. To be fair, the Razr is one bargain of a foldable. I mean, there's the Galaxy Fold, which costs $2,000, or the Huawei Mate X, which adds another $600 to that price. While the Motorola Razr is pretty affordable, when it comes to its competition, of course, it's still a pretty expensive smartphone, which is not really much deserving of its $1,500 price tag. But why exactly is this so? Well, allow me to give you a little tour of the device, starting with the main part of the phone. From first glance, the main part of the Razr looks rather simple. There's a notch, the screen, the bigger than normal sized chin, a fingerprint sensor, and that's just about all there is to really see here. Now, the screen is 6.2 inches, making this a pretty big phone to hold. Now, of course, compared to other flagships like the Galaxy S20 Ultra or the iPhone 11 Pro Max, this phone screen is slightly smaller, but I don't think that'll be a deal breaker for anyone considering this phone. But that's where the good aspects of this phone end. Yeah, it has a screen. That's pretty much the best thing I can say about this phone. Everything else about the Razr is either not good, really bad, or downright unacceptable for a phone at its price point. So let's start off with the not good, starting with the screen's resolution. Now, the Razr's main screen has a resolution of 2142 by 876 pixels. Now, this doesn't quite hit the 1080p mark, so when streaming movies or watching YouTube videos, the highest resolution you'd be able to view content in is 720p. Now, don't get me wrong, 720p screens aren't bad by any means. I mean, we see them all the time in many budget, mid-range, and cheaper smartphones. The only problem is, this isn't a budget, mid-range, or cheap smartphone. In case you haven't already gotten the notion, this phone is $1,500. There are dozens of smartphones out there that are hundreds, even up to $1,000 cheaper than the Razr that offer much higher screen resolutions than it does. When we look at the Razr, which is one of the most expensive mainstream smartphones you could buy right now, you'd probably expect it to be better than most other smartphones. But when you pay flagship price for what is supposedly a flagship phone, you get pretty cheap specs. Because this is the smartphone industry and that's just how things are. As far as everyday usability goes, this again probably won't be a big deal breaker for most people. I mean, 720p screens are manageable on normal smartphones. The Moto Razr isn't a normal smartphone. Putting aside the fact that this is a foldable flip phone because of its noticeably large screen, the phone's resolution of just over 720p most likely won't be enough to accommodate the entire display. This means that each pixel will have to be stretched out and enlarged to the point where you can physically see each individual pixel on the screen in order to fully fit that huge display. So, when watching movies, YouTube videos, or just in all using the phone's screen, you'll notice a pretty apparent lack in quality since those pixels are being expanded to fit such a large screen. But this isn't even the most annoying part about the display.
But wait, there's more!
As we all know, glass is glass. And because glass is glass, glass doesn't exactly bend in half. That is, unless you buy into Samsung's whole revolutionary ultra thin glass story. Glass isn't very much flexible, yes, but you still need some type of material to protect the OLED display. And while glass doesn't bend in half, plastic does. But come on, this is a $1,500 smartphone. We're not really gonna put plastic on a phone this expensive, right? Uh, right? Right? Wrong. Just wrong. Completely wrong. Being rated pretty low on Mohs scale of hardness, plastic doesn't do all too well when it comes to scratch resistance. And flexible OLED displays protected by plastic can easily be scratched by almost anything, from keys and coins to dust and even fingernails. Yep, that's right. Your finger, which, by the way, you use to interact with the phone's screen, can and even will at some point damage the display. And it's not like you can just throw on a screen protector and call it a day. As aforementioned, glass isn't exactly made to bend, so using a screen protector is just out of the question. But even if glass was flexible enough that a screen protector could be applied, when you need to remove the screen protector, ooh, wow. Oh, oh, yikes. But fear not, my dear friends, for I, the greatest tech YouTuber on the face of the planet, has just come up with the perfect solution. All you need to do to protect this phone is don't use the phone with your hands or your fingers. You know, the normal way you would use a smartphone. Vacuum your pockets every morning to get all the dust out. Dust is evil. You know what? Just don't put this phone in your pockets at all. Yeah, that'll work. Just carry it around in a protective box or bag or something. Without putting it in your pockets, of course. Remember, we can't do that. Don't use it in a normal, everyday environment. You know, anything can damage this phone. Run away from your friends and family, assuming you have any, leave the planet, board a rocket to outer space, and live on Mars. I'm sure it'll be fine there. You know, to be on the safe side, just don't use the phone at all. Like, at all. When you buy it, don't take it out of the box. Don't touch it. Don't even look at it. That's dangerous. Just stay as far away from the phone and never use it. Ever. Yeah, I know it sucks, but that's just another price to pay when you're already paying way too much for a smartphone. Okay, so now that we've abused the Razr enough already, let's continue. Now we're on to photography. Now, I'm not all too big when it comes to smartphone cameras. I don't take too many photos with my phone, and I'm not too nitpicky when it comes to how I prefer the photos that I take. Still, I have my standards when it comes to smartphones and the cameras that they have. And these standards are usually based on price. The more expensive a smartphone is, the better you'd expect it to be in general areas, including photography. The Moto Razr, however, is substandard when it comes to cameras, especially for a device at its price point. Let's start with the main camera. Now, there's only one rear-facing camera, and it's a simple 16 megapixel sensor. There's no ultra-wide or telephoto lens, just that one camera. Again, I'm not all too crazy about smartphone cameras, and again, this probably won't be one of the things that pushes people away from buying this phone. But it's 2020, and smartphone companies are taking their camera game a lot more seriously than before. Most smartphones offer at least two rear-facing cameras, the main shooter of course, but also an ultra-wide sensor for wide-angle shots. Even the Galaxy Z Flip, the Razr's main competitor, cared enough as to offer a dual camera setup, which features an ultra-wide camera. So for Motorola to just casually stick on a single sensor kind of felt like they couldn't even care less. But this isn't even the worst part. Oh no, it gets even worse than this. Getting back to the main screen, we have the notch up top. This notch is pretty big and it houses a couple sensors, the earpiece speaker, and the 5 megapixel selfie camera. Wait, hold on. Can we replay that? This notch is pretty big and it houses a couple sensors, the earpiece speaker, and the 5 megapixel selfie camera. A 5 megapixel camera sensor? Now, by 2020 standards, that in itself is subpar, but let's not forget, this phone is $1,500. That is below subpar. That's below terrible. That is in its own realm of completely disappointing. It's even more so disappointing when you consider that the Galaxy Z Flip, which is in fact cheaper than the Razr, doubles this megapixel count. There's really no other way to criticize this. It's beyond bad, beyond terrible. It's just honestly really sad. Thankfully, Motorola noticed this and has made it so that you can take pictures with the 16 megapixel camera sensor, which is better than the dedicated selfie camera. The only question that remains is, how do you take selfies with the main camera? Well, you start by opening the Razr, then you unlock the phone, then you open the camera app, then you close the phone and use the volume keys to take selfies using the main camera and the Razr's quick view display. Of course, you can use the cleverly named auto smile capture and grin weirdly enough at the phone, or use the ingeniously branded gesture selfie and wave at the device like a madman desperately trying to take a selfie with your smartphone. So when it comes to the Moto Razr, you can either take selfies the normal way, the way every other human being does, and get really bad pictures, or take selfies the not normal way, the way no one takes pictures, really. Now let's get back to that quick view display. Like the original Razr, the new model has an outer display, which functions when the phone is closed. Of course, this display is bigger on the newer model, and is capable of quite a few things. It can display the time, show notifications, take selfies like I explained earlier, and allow you to respond to text messages. But aside from the previously listed, the quick view display isn't useful for much else, which makes it seem, to me at least, pretty useless. The purpose of these foldable phones, in my opinion, is to add functionality to an already functional device. And the Galaxy Fold is the best example of this. When the device is closed, you still get a functional phone, I'll admit a little less functional than an actual phone, but you can still do almost anything you could on a normal smartphone. But let's say you want to, I don't know, watch a movie, play a video game, multitask, or just do anything else which requires a larger screen. All you have to do is open the phone, and you get access to a screen that's almost twice the size. The problem here isn't that smartphones are too big and we need to make them smaller, but it's that in some cases, smartphones can be too small and we need to make them bigger. And by increasing the size and usability of these smartphones, you're making them more practical and adding to their functional value. Because when you think about it, foldable smartphones aren't all so cool as companies make them out to be. I mean, sure, it might be more compact and fit in your pocket easier, and let's not forget, it folds. But as time goes on, will those two attributes really be worth spending over $1,000 on? Not really. What really matters is the usefulness and practicality that the device brings to the table. And with the Razr and the Z Flip, there's not much. With the Galaxy Fold, the Huawei Mate X, and even the Mate X2, which I haven't seen much of yet, the whole folding phone thing works. While smartphones are getting bigger and bigger, there are those times where having a larger screen would prove to be the better option. And the fact that you could have a fully working tablet ready at hand without lugging around a bag or a case everywhere you go is one of, let's be honest here, the only things that foldable smartphones actually do well. I don't know about you, but when I use my smartphone, it's not always because I want to check the time or see my notifications. So if you're one of those weirdos who use their smartphone on a day-to-day basis, like almost anyone else, then you're almost never going to be using the quick view display, which makes it appear, well, useless. Now let's get to the overall durability of the Razr. If you're buying a new smartphone, you probably want it to last, especially with smartphone prices surpassing the $1,000 mark, which leads this to become increasingly true with smartphones like the Razr, which, if you haven't caught it yet, cost $1,500. So that raises the question, how durable is the new Razr? Well, I'm sure by now you've seen CNET's full test since this video is coming out literally after all the Moto Razr hype has died, and, you know, everyone cares about the S20 now, and I'm like the only YouTuber still making a video on the Razr because, that's just how life is sometimes. So if you saw their full test on the new Razr, then you probably saw how the Razr gave out at around 27,000 consecutive folds when it began refusing to fold completely. Now 27,000 folds sounds like a lot, but when you compare that to the Galaxy Fold, which they tested last year, that surpassed 100,000 folds, yeah, that's not very good. But what do these numbers actually mean when it comes to everyday use? Well, let's say that you use your phone a lot and you manage to fold your phone up to 100 times per day, every day, give or take, obviously. Assuming that the Razr can survive up to 27,000 folds, that means your $1,500 smartphone will be busted in around 270 days. Yeah, that's not even up to a full year. So, assuming you buy this phone in February when it was released, by late October or early November, your super expensive folding phone won't exactly fold anymore. Let's say you don't use your phone that much and you only fold it around 50 times per day. Well, that'll only get you another 8 months or so to use it before it's time to replace it. In fact, to surpass 2 years of usage, which is normally how long people use the same phone, you would have to fold the Razr only up to 25 times per day. Now, while that does seem like a reasonable amount, keep in mind that you would have to use the phone a lot less than you would probably use any other smartphone to get a pretty average amount of usage time that most other smartphones can offer and even surpass. If you're paying over $1,000 for a new smartphone, which it looks like most of us will be soon, you probably want to and expect for that phone to last. Spending $1,500 on a phone, with it having the ability to break in as little as 8 months, probably isn't the best image for Motorola. Now let's talk more on internals. With phones as expensive as this, there are usually certain things that you would expect by default, and a mid-range, cheap processor isn't one of them. The Moto Razr offers a Snapdragon 710 processor that was not only released 2 years ago, but was released as a mid-range CPU. Motorola most likely chose a cheaper processor over the latest and greatest for cost-cutting purposes. And while I do appreciate Motorola's efforts to compromise, there are certain things you shouldn't compromise on. And a perfect example of this is when you're getting a 2-year-old mid-range processor for $1,500. Even the Galaxy Z Flip, which, as I've mentioned earlier, is cheaper, offers a Snapdragon 855 Plus. Again, one of those things that really make you wonder if this should really be a $1,500 device. Now, all of this by no means indicates the Razr performs poorly in day-to-day usage. Being a mid-range processor, I'm sure it can still hold its own when it comes to normal usage. Being released alongside other flagship phones with flagship processors, however, the flagship Razr isn't going to see much flagshipy. Okay, so we've discussed the not good, the bad, the worser than bad, but now let's get on to the undeniably terrible, the battery. Smartphones are becoming more and more practical as we further apply them to daily life. I mean, we use them for basically everything nowadays. And to constitute for this, we need more power out of them. Most smartphones can put up with at least a day of use, with some of the best surpassing 2 days of usability, and it being only a rarity that a smartphone will reach 3 days on a single charge. With some of the cheapest smartphones offering over 4,000 milliamp hours worth of battery capacity, longer-lasting smartphones are becoming a commodity. Which brings us to the Razr and its 2,510 milliamp hour battery.
Hold up. Wait a minute. Something ain't right.
Honestly, I don't know what year Motorola thought they were in when they were making this phone. By 2020 standards, A battery size as this is already disappointing. By flagship priced $1,500 smartphone standards, that's borderline unacceptable. And yes, it's a foldable phone. So yes, there's not going to be all the space in the world, but for $1,500, that's just downright terrible. And things like this is what presents the overall problem with the Razr. What Motorola wants to do is create a cheaper alternative to a traditional foldable smartphone. But the thing with that is that foldable smartphones aren't meant to be affordable devices, at least not yet. What Motorola did, in pertinence to the Razr, is create the folding part, realized that this phone was going to be way more expensive than they had hoped, and did everything in their power to make this phone as cheap as possible. And I can respect that to a certain degree. Because without the folding aspect of the Razr, this is a really bad phone. At the very most, it probably wouldn't cost more than $60. And this seems to be the whole premise behind the Razr. Yeah, the screen is made out of plastic, but that's okay because it folds. Yeah, sure, it has a 5 megapixel selfie camera, but that's fine because it folds. Yeah, maybe it has a 2510 milliamp hour battery, but we don't need to worry about that because it folds. The bottom line here is that we're not ready for budget foldables. This isn't to say that we won't be, but if or when foldables become mainstream devices and foldable technology becomes more affordable, we'll start seeing cheaper foldables that are more accessible to the masses. But now's just not the time. Thank you so much for checking out this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give me a thumbs up. Really appreciate that. If you want to see more tech videos like this, the sub button will always be there. Until next time, this has been The Gizmo Show. Thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you all next time.